There is a type of man most people fail to notice at first. He does not dominate conversations. He does not raise his voice to prove authority. He does not rush to defend himself every time someone challenges him. In fact, if you watched him in a room full of loud personalities, you might assume he is the least powerful person there. And that assumption is exactly why he wins. While others compete for attention, he observes. While others react emotionally, he studies patterns. Every expression, every insecurity, every careless word spoken in frustration becomes information. And information, in the hands of a patient mind, is more powerful than any weapon. Most people believe victory comes from confrontation. They think power means pushing harder, speaking louder, and fighting every battle that appears in front of them. But history quietly tells a different story. The most effective generals rarely relied on brute force. They understood something deeper about human nature. The greatest victory is the one achieved before the battle even begins. A master strategist does not rush into conflict. He shapes the conditions around it. He allows impatience, ego, and pride to guide his opponents into mistakes that feel natural to them. They believe they are acting freely, but in reality, they are moving exactly where the unseen pressure of strategy has guided them. By the time they realize the situation has turned against them, it is already too late. Nothing dramatic happened. No argument was won. No threat was made. Yet somehow, the outcome has shifted completely. That is the quiet power most people never learn to recognize. The man who wins without fighting does not chase control through force. He creates environments where outcomes unfold in his favor. And when the dust settles, the world calls it coincidence, bad luck, or fate. But the strategist knows the truth. The battle was never meant to be fought. It was meant to be decided long before anyone realized a war had begun. Most people move through life believing that conflict is obvious. They think battles begin the moment voices rise, arguments ignite, and open hostility appears. To them, power looks loud. It looks like dominance, confrontation, and the visible struggle between two opposing forces. But the men who truly understand strategy know something very different. The real war begins long before any of that happens. It begins in silence. Long before a single word is spoken, people are already revealing themselves. Their ambitions leak through careless remarks. Their insecurities surface in subtle reactions. Their loyalties, their fears, their hidden rivalries, everything slowly exposes itself to the one who is patient enough to observe. This is the invisible war. It is fought not with weapons, but with perception. Not with force, but with understanding. While most people are busy reacting to what is happening on the surface, the strategist is studying what is happening beneath it. He watches who seeks approval. He notices who grows defensive. He remembers who speaks too confidently about things they barely understand. Every human interaction leaves behind traces. Patterns form, weaknesses appear. And slowly, a psychological map of the entire environment begins to take shape. The majority of people never realize they are standing on this battlefield. They walk straight into it, driven by impulse, emotion, and ego, unaware that someone else is already reading the terrain. And that is why they lose. Because by the time open conflict finally appears, the outcome has often been decided already. Alliances have formed. Reputations have shifted. Trust has been quietly built or quietly destroyed. What looks like a sudden victory is rarely sudden at all. It is the final stage of a process that began much earlier, when one person chose to observe instead of react. That is the first lesson of real power. The war you see is never the one that truly matters. The decisive battle is always the one unfolding quietly in the minds of the people involved. For centuries, rulers and generals have repeated a simple idea about power. A leader must be strong. He must be bold, fearless, capable of crushing his enemies when the moment demands it. Strength matters. No one denies that. But strength alone has destroyed more leaders than it has ever saved. Long ago, the Florentine strategist Niccolò Machiavelli wrote something that many people quote but very few truly understand. He said, "A ruler must learn to be both a lion and a fox." The lion represents force, power, the ability to intimidate and destroy threats when necessary. But the fox represents something far more subtle, cunning, the ability to see traps before stepping into them, the ability to recognize deception and quietly outmaneuver those who believe they are clever. And here is the detail most people overlook. The fox must always come before the lion. If you lead with force, you reveal your intentions too early. You expose your position. You turn every conflict into a visible battle where others can prepare defenses against you. But the fox operates in a different way entirely. He studies first. He waits. He observes the patterns of behavior that reveal where the true vulnerabilities lie. Pride, impatience, rivalries that already exist beneath the surface. Weak alliances that can fracture with a small amount of pressure. A strategist who thinks like the fox rarely needs to fight like the lion, because by the time force becomes necessary, the battle is already leaning heavily in his favor. The opponent has already made mistakes. Their position has weakened. Their confidence has quietly turned into overconfidence. When the lion finally appears, the outcome feels sudden and decisive. But the truth is that victory was not created by strength alone. It was created by patience, calculation, and the quiet intelligence of the fox that prepared the ground long before the roar was ever heard. Most men lose not because they are weak, and not because they lack intelligence. They lose because they cannot wait. Impatience is the quiet enemy of strategy. The moment tension appears, most people feel an almost uncontrollable urge to act. They respond to insults immediately. They confront problems the moment they appear. They speak before they have fully understood the situation. In their minds, action feels like strength. But in reality, premature action often exposes everything. It reveals emotion. It reveals fear. It reveals the exact moment someone can no longer tolerate uncertainty. And the person who reveals that moment has already surrendered an advantage. A true strategist understands that time is not something to escape from. Time is something to use. When others rush forward, he slows down. When others demand answers, he listens. When pressure begins to build, he allows it to build even further. This is strategic patience. It is not passive waiting. It is controlled stillness. While the impatient mind seeks relief through action, the disciplined mind uses delay as a tool. Silence stretches the moment. Uncertainty spreads through the minds of opponents who expected a reaction and received none. And that silence begins to work on them. They question themselves. They begin to guess. They make assumptions about intentions that were never spoken. Their confidence starts to fracture under the weight of their own imagination. Eventually, impatience pushes them to move first. They speak too soon. They reveal too much. They commit to a position before they fully understand the board. And that is the moment the patient strategist has been waiting for, because the person who moves first out of frustration almost always exposes the weakness that was hidden beneath their confidence. The calm observer does not chase the right moment. He allows the wrong moment to appear for his opponent. And when it does, the outcome becomes much easier to control. Silence is one of the most misunderstood forms of power. Most people experience silence as discomfort. When a conversation pauses for too long, they feel pressure rising inside them. They rush to fill the space with words, explanations, defenses, or emotions. To them, silence feels like weakness, like losing control of the moment. But to a strategist, silence is not emptiness. It is leverage. When you speak constantly, you reveal yourself piece by piece. Your frustrations slip into your tone. Your fears appear in the arguments you choose to defend. Your priorities become visible through the things you react to most quickly. Every word becomes a small window into your thinking, and a patient observer can learn everything he needs from those windows. But silence closes those windows. A man who does not rush to speak becomes difficult to read. Others cannot easily determine what he is thinking, what he intends to do, or what truly matters to him. This uncertainty creates tension, and tension changes the behavior of everyone in the room. People begin talking more than they planned. They explain themselves further than necessary. They attempt to fill the void with information that was never requested. In doing so, they slowly reveal their own positions. This is why silence can be more powerful than confrontation. When someone attacks you verbally, responding immediately gives them the conflict they were hoping for. The moment becomes loud, emotional, and predictable, but silence changes the entire dynamic. Without resistance, the attacker begins to look unstable. Without an argument to fight against, their aggression hangs in the air with nowhere to land. What they expected to become a battle instead becomes a mirror reflecting their own behavior. And that mirror can be deeply uncomfortable. The strategist understands this simple truth. Words are resources, and resources must be used carefully. Speak when it moves the situation forward, but when speaking adds nothing, silence becomes the strongest statement you can make. Power is rarely decided by facts alone. More often, it is decided by the story people believe. Most men assume that if they simply act with good intentions, the truth will eventually defend them. They believe that reality speaks for itself, but the world does not work that way. Reality is constantly being interpreted, reshaped, and retold through the perceptions of others. And perception is a battlefield. The man who understands this does not fight only for outcomes. He fights for meaning. He understands that two identical events can produce completely different consequences depending on how they are explained to the world. This idea was observed centuries ago by Niccolò Machiavelli, who noted that people judge more by what they see than by what they truly understand. In other words, appearances often carry more influence than hidden truths. A strategist never ignores this reality. He understands that reputation is a form of armor. It protects him before conflicts even begin. When people expect discipline, intelligence, and restraint from a man, they interpret his actions through that lens. The narrative already favors him. But if someone else defines your image first, you lose control of the battlefield before the battle even starts. Rumors spread quickly, assumptions multiply, and once a narrative becomes established, it is extremely difficult to reverse. That is why powerful individuals shape their story deliberately. They choose their words carefully. They act with consistency. They allow their actions to reinforce a clear identity over time. When challenges arise, they do not panic or over-explain. Instead, they calmly redirect attention, allowing their established reputation to carry weight on their behalf. In the end, the strategist understands something simple yet profound. People rarely follow the most accurate version of events. They follow the version that feels most convincing. And the person who quietly guides that story often guides the final outcome as well. One of the most elegant victories in any conflict is the one where your opponent defeats himself. No confrontation, no dramatic struggle, no visible force. Just a slow, quiet collapse that seems to happen naturally. This is possible because human beings carry their greatest weaknesses within themselves. Pride, insecurity, ambition, and ego often operate beneath the surface of every decision. Most people are not defeated by external enemies. They are defeated by the parts of themselves they refuse to examine. A skilled strategist understands this deeply. Instead of attacking a weakness directly, he studies it. He watches how it appears in small behaviors. The need to prove intelligence, the hunger for recognition, the inability to admit mistakes, the quiet desperation to appear powerful in front of others. Once the pattern becomes clear, he does something unexpected. He stops resisting it. In fact, he encourages it. If a rival believes himself to be the smartest person in the room, the strategist does not challenge that belief. Challenging pride only makes it defensive. Instead, he allows the illusion to grow. Sometimes he even feeds it with subtle praise or quiet agreement. Over time, confidence becomes overconfidence. Preparation becomes complacency, and caution slowly disappears. The rival begins to act more boldly, convinced that his position is secure and his judgment cannot be questioned. In that moment, the foundation of his strategy becomes dangerously weak. What once looked like strength begins to transform into vulnerability. The strategist does not need to push. Gravity will take care of the rest. The opponent, blinded by his own ego, eventually makes the mistake that exposes everything. And when the collapse comes, it rarely looks like the result of manipulation. It looks like arrogance meeting its natural consequence. This is why patience and observation matter so much. The most effective strategist does not waste energy fighting every opponent directly. He simply gives them enough space to reveal who they truly are. And in many cases, that is more than enough for them to engineer their own downfall. Many people are fascinated by the idea of the self-made man, the lone figure who rises through the world by his own strength, relying on no one and needing nothing from anyone. It is a powerful image, but in reality, it is mostly a myth. No general, no leader, and no strategist has ever held power for long while standing completely alone. Power is rarely an individual achievement. It is an architecture of relationships. The most capable strategists understand this long before conflict appears. They do not wait until they are under pressure to seek allies. By that point, it is already too late, because people can sense desperation immediately. When someone only offers loyalty during a crisis, others know it is a transaction, not a bond. Real alliances are built in quieter times. A thoughtful leader invests in people when there is nothing to gain in the moment. He offers support, respect, and opportunity without making immediate demands in return. Over time, this creates something far more valuable than a simple exchange of favors. It creates loyalty. Loyalty forms slowly, but once established, it becomes one of the strongest defenses a person can possess. When challenges eventually arise, and they always do, those who respect you will move to protect the relationship naturally. They do not hesitate or calculate every benefit. They act because the connection already carries meaning. This is what separates temporary alliances from lasting networks. A strategist also understands that influence spreads through people. One trusted ally often connects to another, and over time a web of relationships forms that strengthens your position without constant effort. Then, when conflict finally arrives, the situation looks very different. Instead of standing alone against pressure, you are surrounded by individuals who prefer your success to your failure. And in many cases, that silent support is enough to discourage opposition before it even begins. Many people believe fear is created through aggression. They imagine it coming from raised voices, harsh threats, or displays of force meant to intimidate others into obedience. On the surface, this kind of behavior can appear powerful. It demands attention and creates immediate reactions. But the fear produced by loud aggression rarely lasts. Once people realize that a threat is only noise, they begin to challenge it. They test its limits. Eventually, the display of power becomes predictable, and what once looked intimidating begins to look insecure. Real influence works differently. The most powerful form of fear is not created by what someone says they will do. It is created by uncertainty about what they are capable of doing. When a man constantly announces his intentions, he reveals his limits. People know where the boundaries are. They understand how far he is willing to go, and they learn how to move around those boundaries safely. But when someone remains controlled and difficult to read, the situation changes. Others begin to imagine possibilities. They remember moments where that person acted decisively. They recall the calm way he handled previous conflicts. And because he does not constantly advertise his strength, every past action becomes more significant in memory. Reputation quietly grows. Over time, people begin to treat him differently. They measure their words more carefully. They hesitate before provoking him, not because he has threatened them, but because they cannot clearly predict his response. That uncertainty becomes a silent form of pressure. It keeps opponents cautious. It forces them to consider consequences before acting recklessly, and in many situations, that hesitation alone is enough to prevent conflict entirely. The strategist understands that visible force is often the most expensive form of power, but reputation, discipline, and mystery create a kind of influence that costs nothing and spreads on its own. When people fear what you might do, you rarely have to do anything at all. Every long conflict eventually approaches a decisive moment. Not the loud, dramatic moment people imagine in stories, but something much quieter. A small shift in position, a decision that closes one path and opens another. To most observers, it appears ordinary, almost accidental. But to the strategist, this moment has been carefully prepared. The final move is rarely about sudden brilliance. It is the result of patient positioning that has been unfolding long before anyone noticed. Small actions taken weeks or months earlier begin to align. Alliances quietly formed start influencing decisions. A reputation built over time begins shaping how others interpret events. By the time the final move appears, the outcome already leans heavily in one direction. This is why the most effective strategists do not seek dramatic victories. They seek inevitability. They place each piece carefully until the situation reaches a point where only one result is possible. From the outside, it looks like circumstances simply unfolded that way. A rival loses support. Opportunities begin to disappear. Mistakes suddenly carry heavier consequences than before. The structure that once protected him slowly weakens until it can no longer hold its weight. Then the final shift occurs. Sometimes it is a single decision. Sometimes it is a quiet withdrawal of support. Sometimes it is nothing more than allowing events to proceed without interference. But whatever form it takes, the result feels strangely natural to everyone watching. That is the signature of a well-executed strategy. There is no celebration, no public declaration of victory, and no need to claim credit. The strategist understands that drawing attention to the method only teaches future opponents how it was done. So he steps back into silence. Others will debate what happened. Some will call it bad luck. Others will call it fate. Very few will recognize the careful design behind the outcome. And that is precisely the point. The best final move is the one no one realizes was a move at all.